all that, I want to talk to you about getting excited about study and meditation. Study and meditation. That's such an important discipline. And you see this diagram here of the spiritual disciplines. Some of you know I've been training. I weightlifting. I used to compete years ago and still train. I do as much as I can.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Be safe.
Not as easy as it used to be. But one of the things I learned from the discipline, weightlifting, I got saved through a weightlifter. He led me to Jesus. And as I was physically getting disciplined, I also said to the Lord at that time, Lord, I will not spend 1 minute more in the gym than I will spend in your word, and accomplishing, just so that I would train my mind and my heart as much as I was willing to train my body at that time. And that's what the spiritual disciplines get us. Well, I've lived by that. And there's that passage in the Bible that says, though the outward man gets weaker, the inward man is getting renewed daily. Well, I sense that now, as I haven't had a gain in weightlifting in 25 years, but the inward man can be renewed daily. And you can get that renewal through disciplined study of the word. There's that, you might remember that saying years ago. It was that, we have, greater, highways, but we don't even cross our road to meet our neighbor and all that. But there was one line in that I received that really stuck with me. And it really describes the spirit of our age. It is a time when there is much in the showroom window and nothing in the stockroom. I think our age, and Brian, you talked about television, but now it's even more invasive. You have now social media. You can interact with it. You have video gaming. Now you don't just watch the TV. Now you're in the TV. You're actually participating. And as a result, what has happened is not just the kind of behavior it produces, but what it replaces. Now, I certainly want to be technologically savvy. I have my cell phone. I have my computer. I can do my internet. I can do my social media. But those spiritual discipline, especially the one of study, is that which continues. It's not just the show, having the appearance of good and not really being good, or having the appearance of being a Christian and not really being Christian in my heart. So we've got this show. And as a pastor, I've been a pastor for 42 years. Well, I get their Sunday face, their church face. They look good. Everything in life is going well. But then you start to search and you talk about their work, or you visit in the home and you say, it's not the same. And sadly, I think for us, we have gotten the appearance, but we have lacked the substance. And that's the paradox of our time. Dallas Willard had a gripping quote. He wrote in a book called The Spirit of the Disciplines. Here's what he wrote. Now, just listen to this and you'll notice the area I highlighted. To depart from righteousness is to choose a life of crushing burdens, failures, and disappointments, a life caught in the toils of endless problems that are never resolved. Here is the source of that unending soap opera, that sometimes horror show known as normal human life. Wow. Just get a hold of that phrase, that sometimes horror show known as normal human life. We have so taken on a lot of the culture that surrounds us that what looks like normal human life is really subnormal. It's really subnormal. And that is, again, and I want you just start reflecting on that quote and think about that quote. What is normal? I have people talk about getting into the real world. What is the real world? We think about this material world and that which we're in culture and surrounded by. We think of that which we see on the TV. That's just pretend world. Or video gaming. That's pretend world. It's like that the Matrix. Do you want the red pill or do you want the blue pill? Do you want to live in the real world? You want to live in this sort of a video world where you could just enjoy all the pleasures of life, not realizing that in the real world you're really a prisoner. Normal human life. What has happened to us? 2 Timothy 3 and verse 7. If you read 2 Timothy 3, it describes the spirit of the age before the Lord is going to return, the last days. And it says, and here's another phrase, one of the phrases is always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. In our age, in a postmodern culture, in a multicultural culture, we're always learning, but to say you have the truth is offensive. It is out of touch. It's out of step with reality. But the idea that we will always learn, but never able to say this is the truth, or Jesus is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life, right? So think about that. Think about that as we get to our reflection time, as we start talking about understanding and coming to the knowledge of the truth. This is a poem. It's a part of a play that was written almost 90 years ago by T.S. Eliot. It's called The Rock. And I memorized this poem because it is so telling. Even though it was written 90 years ago, it's even more true today than it was 90 years ago when he wrote it. And so he wrote about this. Here's what he said. The endless cycle of idea and action, endless invention, endless experiment brings knowledge of motion, but not of stillness. Knowledge of speech, but not of silence. Knowledge of words and ignorance of the word. All our knowledge brings us nearer to death, but nearness to death, no nearer to God. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? And where is the knowledge we have lost in information? We are so flooded with information that we haven't really ever taken the time to process. It used to be, at least when we were growing up, yes, we had the influence of the TV and other things that were invasive in the home. But now, if I want an answer, rather than researching or going to, my thoughts or my thinking, what do? We Google search. You just search for it, right? And we have a flood of information, and we never take time to actually think about it or process it. So what has been the result is we have accepted a subnormal standard of Christianity. And the result is we find that we're powerless and shallow. You've heard that phrase, a mile wide and 1 inch deep. We've lost that ability to go deep. Now, we can affirm the role of discipline for success in every area of life. I mean, when we talk about I not only competed in weightlifting, I trained weightlifters. I trained 2 that were world-class lifters. And I will tell you, if you take a talented or a guy who physically has a great frame, or you take a disciplined athlete, I'll take the disciplined athlete every time. I had one guy who came into my gym who started in 8th grade. He was about, 5'6", 130 pounds, got himself up to world-class lifts, weighing about 170, bench press over 400 pounds. He never missed a workout. He was always at the gym anytime we were open. He went on the internet. He would research world-class lifters. He researched about supplements. He got the rest he needed, the food, all of those things, all of those elements, the training principles, became a world-class lifter. I'll take a disciplined athlete anytime. You take a same thing. You take an intelligent student or a disciplined student. I'll take the disciplined student every time. Or business. You give me a talented worker or a disciplined worker. We acknowledge in every area the role of discipline, except in Christian living and service. And there we call it legalism. Well, the root word, same root word for disciple, is discipline. And so that whole discipline study yields tremendous results. You can be your heart can be right. You can be an energized, a thinker, a person who cares a great deal, but unless you take on those disciplines, it's not going to, you'll end up being powerless and shallow. Why do we resist the disciplines? Why do we resist that? Well, it's interesting. If you remember this story, this is Exodus 20 is the giving of the commandments on Mount Sinai. And I love this picture because it just shows it was a scary scene. It talked about thunder and lightning and voices and everything else. And the people, when Moses came down and shared the law, he says, Moses, go ahead, you speak to God and we'll talk to you. And I think that's what we want. I'm going to go and, I'm going to listen to the pastor, and the pastor has gone up on the mountain and he's met with God, but I don't have to do that. You just listen to God and I'll talk to you. Professor, you just give me the stuff and you just give me all the knowledge and I'll just listen to you. And, we want to go between. And Moses answers that. He said, look, God has given you, yes, it's scary. It's a scary thing in the presence of a holy God. You have to have a holy, righteous awe, but he's done this to give you a healthy fear of sin and to approach God carefully. And when we do our study, it should be careful. We need to recognize we're talking about the most important subject in the universe, God and his word and his ways. So I love this verse too in Matthew 27:51, that to approach the Holy of Holies, this was sort of a recreation of Moses and his experience on Mount Sinai and maybe before the burning bush. And he said, to access and get into the very presence of God is an awesome thing. And when Jesus died on the cross, Matthew has in his gospel this very little detail. He said that when he died, the veil of the temple was torn in two. So now the way is open for all people to enter into the presence of God, into the Holy of Holies, into the inner sanctum with God. We have that access because of Jesus and his death on the cross. So, are we ready to pay the price? See, you remember the commercials for Acura, right? Those commercial interruptions that Dr. Rawls was talking about, right? Well, the Acura commercial said this: in the relentless pursuit of excellence. I would say that's a good slogan for a Christian. The relentless pursuit of holiness. As Jeremiah says, many people can quote Jeremiah 29:11. Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. But then it continues and it says this: you will seek me and you will find me if you search for me with your whole heart. Relentless pursuit of holiness. See, now I remember talking about the disciplines in one class. I was talking about discipline of prayer and study and solitude and meditation and all that. And one of the students says, quite honestly, it sounds sort of like a monastic living. It sounds boring. My response was simply this: I want to tell you something. God is not boring. It's boring unless you include the fact that in the disciplines we can actually meet with God. So, how do we get in the presence? Well, in Colossians 2, it has an interesting phrase. If you read it in the Greek, it has a phrase. It talks in Colossians 2:20-23, will worship. Isn't that interesting? There's an interesting phrase, will worship. What is will worship? Well, worship is the worship of the strong will, willpower. How did you lose weight? Willpower. How did you, get successful in business? Willpower. That's will worship, right? Willpower. And we, even as Christians, we say, no, how do you get to be a good Christian? Willpower. I'm going to will it into existence. And Paul says it's not only incorrect, it's actually false worship. We're worshiping a strong will. Will worship will succeed for a time, but it will only result in outward change. You'll change the stock room, or you'll change the showroom, but not the stock room. You're going to change the outward show. It will not change inside. How do we get permanent change? Permanent change. See, we cannot change the world. We cannot change our church. We cannot even change ourselves by trying harder, by programming it into existence. See, that's what Paul calls will worship. It's not about trying harder. It's not in the doing, it's in the receiving. I receive from God his presence, his peace, his heart. I get into the Holy of Holies and access the heart of God. I receive that. I can't produce that. I just receive it. I get in the position where I'm ready to receive it. Well, here's our theme verse for this retreat. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but watch this, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do you hear that? First of all, transform, that word in Greek is metamorpho, and it's the same word used for a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Now, if you took a caterpillar, nowadays we have with microscopes and microsurgery, we have very fine instruments. Supposing we were able to sew wings onto a caterpillar, he would look like he could fly, but he can't fly. Why? He's not been transformed. And so here, metamorpho, what he has to go through is this process right here. You see the chrysalis. He has to go in the chrysalis, and he completely reshapes himself inside the chrysalis. Well, there's a stage in the chrysalis where he's actually, the process is almost complete, but he's getting out of the chrysalis, and it's something like this, okay? He's in the chrysalis, and it goes, and he's trying to get out, and he's trying to get out of the chrysalis. Now, one guy actually did an experiment where he took a very small, a scalpel, and he actually cut the chrysalis to make it easier. What happened? Well, that butterfly got out, spread his wings, but they were shriveled, and he finally dropped, and he could never fly. Why? God has made it that part of this process for the butterfly is the struggle. He's got to get out of this chrysalis. And as he does that, it's a way of putting juice and strength into the wings so that he could spread his wings and fly. And I submit to you that that's part of what the discipline of study does. A study, you've got to wrestle with it. I've had students, and you know it, those of us who are professors, we know we get a paper where they just, they'll go on and they'll just cite a verse and cite a verse and cite a verse and cite, or they'll go online and they'll get a quote, and they never actually struggle with it. They never actually think it through. What does this mean in my mind? How does this apply to what I'm doing? See, that's where the discipline of study comes in. It's a wrestling match. And so the first step of transformation is transformation of the mind, right? So Galatians 4:19. What is the goal of this study? No, it's not so I have more knowledge about the dates and times and events and all of that in the story. Certainly you want to do that. But the goal is until Christ is formed in you. That is a continual process. That's not a one-time act. It's given to you instantly, but you grow in it, just as a child who is born has to grow in his strength and as he grows in years, right? Or 1 Corinthians 2:16, who has known what? The mind of the Lord so as to instruct him. But we have the mind of Christ, to start thinking like Christ. To start thinking like Christ. Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks within himself, so he is, right? So our thought process, what do you think about these verses? How do you apply them? Or John 8:32, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Notice that verse does not say the truth will set you free. It says you will know the truth, and then the truth will set you free. The truth is there. It's always there for the taking. But you know the truth, then you are set free. You can know that. You can be acquainted with the truth, not just know the facts. You need to be acquainted with the truth. So, what's the difference between meditation and study? Well, meditation is the proper application, is the goal, whereas in study, the proper interpretation is the goal. I want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly, but in meditation is where I want to apply it. So, 4 steps in study. For instance, Ezra. First step, set your heart in it. Don't just do it as a discipline for a grade. I always ask the students, I say, do you want a diploma or do you want an education? It's a little different. Do you want study or do you want really your heart to be changed? You want permanent change? How do you get that? Well, you set your heart to do it. Second is you need to do it daily. It's my first time of the day. I set a goal. My goal is I want to read a chapter of the Bible, and I read either commentaries or something on that. And I want to do it every day. And I also want to read at least one page of a good theological book. Right now, I'm reading The Bondage Breaker by Neil Anderson. I'm just reading about spiritual warfare, as that seems to be President Schroeder's area that he's really grown in lately. So I just said I want to learn more about that. Set a goal. And see, you've heard it said, if you tell yourself a lie over and over again, you believe it. The same thing works with the truth. You tell yourself the truth over and over again, you begin to believe it. That's what you do as you set your mind. Third is make it clear so that you understand. And then again, this is Ezra reading the book, but this is a good theme verse for preaching, is you are making it clear so that people understand not just what you think about it, but what the verse says, right? Make it clear. And then John 7:14. And this is so important. If you go to God and say, God, I want to know your will, and I'll think about it. God, I want to know your will, and I'll decide. You'll never know. You'll never know. You got to go to God and say, God, when I know what it is you want me to do, I will do it. That's what Jesus says in John 7. If anyone's willing to do his will, then he will know whether this teaching is from men or from God. You need to say that to God. I'm going to run through this very quickly because I want to get to an application point, but some very important study tools I use: a really good study Bible. I have a very good NIV study Bible. Get that because I have a sample here. You got cross references. Some days I'll just chase cross references. I'll look at this one and then I'll look at another one and just chase it around, or commentary right in there. All of those things. Get a good study Bible. If I had 2 actual books in my library, I'd have a good study Bible and Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. Because in the concordance, there's a tool there for word study. This is online, Blue Letter Bible or Bible Hub. And if you look at this, it actually gives you the original language, it gives you the transliteration, then it gives you the translation, and it tells you what it is, whether it's a noun, a verb, and then you have that number on top. That number on top is the Strong's number. Every word in the Bible is numbered, so you can find the original. So when you go to the original, here's one of the words here, for instance, in here, idolothutes, right? Well, if you click on that number, 1494, you go here's that word. And it's talking about things sacrificed to idols. Well, you don't have to be a Greek scholar to do that. You just click and you can find out word study right there. You get the words. This is something I love. I have a thing called 20 Centuries of Great Preaching, or the classics. I have the Ante-Nicene, Nicene, and Post-Nicene Fathers. If you want to check to see if you have an observation, you say, you know what, in 2,000 years of church history, no one's ever thought of this, it's probably wrong. It's probably wrong. So that's why I have the classics, and I have to check on what the classics say to make sure that, because I'm sure that somebody else has thought of it before me, right? And so that's why I use those tools. Now, meditation on the word simply involves deep concentration and relaxation. There are two ways of meditating. I'm just going to get into one just for time, just to notice, how many verses in the Bible we see in meditation. And that word, there's a difference between what's called transcendental meditation, which is an Eastern religion discipline. That's not Christian meditation. Christian meditation is on God's word. And you see these many passages. I won't get into them for time's sake. So, how do we meditate? Two steps: relaxation, place, and time. I have a prayer chair. It's right here to my left. It's my favorite chair in the house. It's my prayer chair. You got to have a place and you got to have a time, right? A place without interruption. I love that Wesley image of putting the head over, the veil over her head so she could actually be alone with God. Find a place without interruption. My wife, in the spring and summer, she has a prayer garden out back. That's her favorite place where she just goes and she just can pray right there. But second, deep concentration. See, Eastern meditation is you empty your mind and you just let it just go where it wants. Christian meditation is you fill it with thoughts of God and the scriptures. Memorization is a vehicle to meditation. I still believe in the discipline of memorization. I think we've gotten very lazy with our devices, is that we just look for a verse on there, and I do it too. But I also want to make sure that I'm still memorizing. I'm working on Romans 7-8. I've been working on that for at least a year, and just memorizing that transition from Romans 7 to Romans 8. But it's a vehicle. You start to notice little things when you memorize, and it's there. You don't have to bring a Bible with you anywhere. You just have it right here, right? Imagination is another vehicle to meditation. Think about a story. Imagine the setting, the sights, the smells, the sounds. Use as many senses as you can and just enjoy the story and really try to picture it in your mind. Don't let somebody else do it. Don't go to a TV show or a video or something. Picture it in your mind. Use your mind. Here's one that we're going to do. And so during our meditation time, I'm going to ask you to actually do an exercise in meditation. It's a very easy exercise. It's a great place to begin. What I do is you can take any verse and you just start writing down, if this is true or because it is true, then make an application. All right. So, of course, what is the best result is make sure that you are sharing that time and understanding Jesus is with you. And you just go at him with the whole heart and you share God's sightings and even your doubts. You go and share them with God. You share your problems, your issues, your struggles, your battles, your defeats, victories, all of that. You just share with him. Well, here's your exercise for the next few minutes. 7 words. This is in John 3. Here's John the Baptist. He's being approached by his followers, saying that, more people are following Jesus now than are following you. And what does John say? He knows his role. And he says 7 words in English. Here's what he says. Watch this. He must increase, but I must decrease. Now, a way I do a meditation is this: emphasize different words. He must increase, but I must decrease. 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 So what I want you to do now, you have a sheet that was sent to you, or you just take a sheet of paper, old-fashioned paper. Don't do anything online. Write down, using those 7 words, because that is true. That is a principle for John the Baptist, and it's a principle for you and me. What difference does that make? 3 or 4 minutes, just get started. But write down some applications for that verse. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to go mute. His will is good and perfect. All of us, you can just do that. And you can, I would suggest get a notebook of some sort, or a journal book of some sort. Sue has her journal book. She and I are working on something together, and she just writes her thoughts in here. This is a good pillar journal book. You can use something like that, and just take that time and write some of your thoughts. Have a great time with the discipline of study. It's a blessing to really dig deep, and I hope you can do that. Thank you.